welcome back to Cast Me to Hell with me, Seb.
And with me, Robbie.
And here we are, back with our must-see horror feature. And this week we are looking at Death Race 2000 from 1975.
So I don't even know if this is a horror. Let's get it out there.
That's the main first question. I think, so we have our poster.
Yeah, classic poster.
And we both threw a dart, our classic horror Jason Voorhees dart, at the board to decide. I think the two options that we ended up with were not the ones that we quite were expecting. They were much more different than I think we've previously covered. Not that that's a bad thing. We want to get out of our comfort zone and take it. But although one of them we knew was a classic horror.
Definitely.
The Birds, which is an upcoming episode. Look out for it. The Death Race 2000 was one that we were like, is that a horror film?
Yeah.
Is that even what? I mean, I know it's got death in the title, but the second you look it up online, it certainly doesn't sound like a horror film in any way.
And it's a sci-fi dystopian film about a bloodbath car racing that takes place during the day. It reminds me of something like Soylent Green, where you could argue that Soylent Green is more of a horror film than this.
Yeah, I think I can see the inspiration, and that there's a lot of dystopian things like 1984 George Orwell and those kind of things that have definitely been taken from from here and put into this film. And there are some things where it tries to give a political message in the film, but it's still the only deciding factor, I think, of thinking obviously the dystopian, and sometimes it can be really grueling and harsh and brutal, and then you can think, right, it's a horror film because it's more of that. Even Soylent Green, like you said, has more of a darker tone to it, or things like that, while still having that kind of dark humour that could be about it. This one is pretty much almost satirical at times, with the approach that it's kind of taking with the source material.
Yeah, it's a very weird film in that aspect. It does have a lot of that 70s dystopian sci-fi vibe that you kind of just summed up.
It's Roger Corman, who is pretty much known for being this kind of he's kind of like the king of cult kind of thing. He was kind of the first one to make these kind of horror films that were kind of alternatives and different kind of films that were made on a low budget but made some money.
Yeah.
You can almost, nowadays you've got plenty of producers who are now starting again specifically with horror to try and focus on making lower budget films and trying to turn them into bigger budget, like Blumhouse.
Yeah,
does quite a lot of that. But he's much more. But at the same time, he also had this kind of humour and bloodlust almost, and this kind of he kind of liked the kind of the cheesy and the corny.
Yeah.
So he's much more if you think about trauma films.
Yeah, trauma.
Toxic Avenger and stuff like that. It's much more kind of in that kind of wheelhouse.
I'm just on his Wikipedia now, looking at the films that he produced or was director of, and it looks like in 1955 he makes his debut with Five Guns West, and it looks like it starts with kind of Western films which were popular
in the 50s. That was the major
the
major way in.
It starts turning to more kind of gangster films, with there's one called Machine Gun Kelly, I'm Mobster, and then I think we get to House of Usher, The Little Shop of Horrors, The Pit and the Pendulum, and then it starts to, in the 60s onwards, it starts to really turn to
when that horror hype started to build. He definitely lent into that more, because obviously he's the creator of the Little Shop of Horrors.
Yeah,
not the Rick Moranis one, but the earlier version of that. But he'd made a mixture of ones where I've read about him before, so he'd gone back and forth between. He made a lot of those for low budget, which meant that people were like, "Well, you're making money out of these films, though.
Yeah,
you're making low budget films that are making money." and that led to him having production companies and having more will. And then he kind of went away from some of that horror and went more towards like. I think he went back to some of them because he made like the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, which might sound like an awesome horror film, but it's actually based on a gangster killing, an actual true stories and stuff like that. So he started to make more of those, but I think as he went later in life, he went back to the kind of the horror.
Yeah. I mean, he did The Fast and the Furious in 1954, so he set that up. He did.
He gave Vin Diesel his chance.
Yeah, he gave their little baby Vin Diesel.
Yeah, what you don't know is Vin Diesel cameos in that one.
Would revive that.
With his first word, family.
But it looks like he does actually have a lot of stuff. So obviously, Dementia 30.
He made tons, yeah.
Francis Ford Coppola.
Rollerball was one that led into this one.
Boxcar Bertha with Martin Scorsese.
He's also
Grand Theft Auto with Ron
That's the
Howard.
other thing about Roger Corman is he was someone who would tend to give a lot of people their first breaks.
Yeah.
So there are so many directors that we have because of Martin Scorsese, like you said, Bertha, Ron Howard got to make Grand Theft Auto, not based on the game version, but Grand Theft Auto back in the day. There are loads of many directors, even giving some actors their first breaks, like Robert De Niro and things like that. So he's kind of led the way for a lot of these actors. Even here, we have Mr. Stallone before his big role.
That's what got me thinking this, right? Because obviously, the film is kind of about this dystopian race. I think there's something there where America has had an economic collapse, and the world needs like something to keep people entertained. It's almost like in Gladiator when they nobody likes the new emperor played by Joaquin Phoenix, so he's like, bring back the Colosseum because that'll keep the people happy. It's that kind of vibe, and we get all these strange races. So there is like I'm trying to remember.
They make
but there is
they make up the majority. Well,
there's
the races and the racers. Yeah. Frankenstein, David Carradine,
who is how you have to start dressing like weird gimps.
Frankenstein is almost like Frankenstein. Well, this is before Star Wars, and yet it looks a bit like Vader.
It looks a little.
He looks like he's like a partial Vader.
I thought it was like a gimp outfit. You know?
It's kind of a gimp outfit at the same time. It's like his gimpy little outfit, but then But I was kind of looking at it going, is this like Vader? Like they've taken off of the hype of Star Wars, but then I was like, oh, actually, I think. Yeah, unless I'm incorrect, this is after New Hope.
But then you have Sly Stallone as Machine Gun Joe Viterbo, who's like a Chicago tough guy gangster, who's great. Stallone. Yeah, you have Calamity Jane, who's like this cowgirl. Matilda the Hun, who's like a neo-Nazi, which is mental because.
The two Nazis is like
the two Nazis are great.
Well, I think that's
which is the only time you could probably say, I really like those Nazis.
I think that's part of the thing, though. It is a world where as if the communists or the Nazis had succeeded in some way. I think that's part of what builds the Americas. I think.
But I don't know. They kind of. Because they
make it sound like a cross culture of different places. And stuff like that.
Well, they're allowing like Nazi flags, Joe, in this race because they're cheering on Matilda. And then there's Nero the hero, like a Roman gladiator. But even like America has a new flag. Which is, like,
Nero the hero. He's played by the guy out of Karate Kid.
Yeah.
I'm blanking on his name, but
I can't remember his name as well.
He's not around for long, to be fair.
Martin Cove.
That's one. Yeah, I was going there and I'm like, Karate Kid.
And this is the weirdest thing that I thought about was I thought about Sly Stone in this film, right? Where this is obviously probably pre-Rocky, or maybe like the year before.
This is the year before Rocky, yeah.
And Rocky obviously launched him to this massive success. The same with Arnie. You know, during the 80s and the 90s, Arnie and Sly were like untouchable. And it made me think of, at the moment, you know, you've got The Rock, you've got Vin Diesel, and you've got Jason Statham. Yeah. And all of them are big action stars, and all of their contracts say, like, we can't be seen to lose a fight. You know? That's why the Fast films, it's really shit, because like, they won't allow each other to lose.
It has to be a draw.
It has to be a draw. They both can't be like, no, I can't be beaten. Yeah. And it's a really shit kind of like plot armor and contract thing that they have. And watching Sly Stone in this film, where he's like this asshole, like woman beating, like horrid, like prick who's jealous, and who's like swearing all the time. It made me think, like, how much fun could you have, like, if you were just as an actor allow yourself to like lean into these roles? Because he's like he's good in this film. I'd be like,
he's chewing the scenery like fucking crazy. But he's all in for this role,
and because like one of the things that I do kind of like about the film, I feel it feels strange talking about this film on a horror podcast and in the must see horror, because it clearly isn't must see horror. But I will ruin that for us all now, unless you have a controversial opinion.
We will come back to that. I guess we'll build to that suspense.
But like the campiness of it and the fact that everybody leans into it so much is really fun about the film. Like when I watched it, there were points where I was legit laughing out loud. Like there's this other guy, one of the main characters, Junior Bruce, who is like this. I had proper U-Tree vibes from him. He's like this like 70s like TV host.
Oh yeah.
You know? And
the guy that's always walking up going like, "What you gonna do tonight, guys?"
Yeah, he's like, "Oh, we're interviewing like the wife of the first person killed in the race." Yeah,
they're all proper. All of the presenters are properly like, "My good friend, this guy." And they're just like, "Fuck you."
And I love that it kind of not only is it again like it's the characters leaning into it, but it's that whole thing of like, you're on TV, smile. This is like dystopian. Like you have to be oh, my husband just got like mowed down on live TV. I love it. I win a car. You know,
that scene was great when it's literally the because that's like one of the people in the competition that Frankenstein just decides to just mow down because it's like, yeah, fuck it, I'm tired of hearing you talk. That's later. No, that's later. It's the construction worker who gets mowed down. Yeah, the first guy to get taken out by Stallone's character.
Stallone. And I was telling Anna about it because I'd never seen the film before. It does have a remake by
I've seen the remake. I saw the remake in the cinema.
In the cinema, enjoyable.
I did back in 2008 or something. Like that. They're very different films.
I imagine. So.
I think Paul W. Anderson said his is actually meant to be less a remake and more of a prequel to this film, but the tones do not match at all.
But it's like
how Jason Statham became Frankenstein.
But they talk about like this. So the race across America isn't just about like getting to the point, it's about accumulating points on the way. And I love that they talk like for a man it's 10 points, for a woman it's 20 points, for a teenager it's like 25, for a baby it's 40. And this year for old people or people over like 75 it's 80 points. And I love that like they're just driving and then Sly Stallone's like, I'm just going to mow this guy down. And he just mows this construction worker down. And I think you watched this before me a couple of days and you messaged me like, it is pretty gory. And it does have these moments where it's not like video nasty levels of gore.
No.
And maybe this is why people think, it's on the horror side. Because like some of the killings are relatively violent.
That is one thing. It does. This is the one thing that holds it for being horror, is that it is pretty graphic in some scenes. Like you see body parts flung about and you see blood splattering. There is a certain and I was like, oh, actually this is quite good. Like that first guy so we just mentioned, as Sly Stallone comes along and his car has machine guns on it and has giant swords like hanging out the front, doesn't it? Like sticking out the front of it kind of thing, and the guy kind of gets edged by I think it's implied because of the effects at the time you can't quite show it directly, but I think it's implied that the sword gets him kind of thing, because it basically tears his like legs and then he gets smashed across the car kind of thing. But that's pretty like you get to see a leg fly and you get to see his blood splatter and it's fairly graphic.
The best is the old people's all being wheeled outside by the hospital, and they're like, it's euthanasia day. And it's so surreal. It's amazing. I genuinely was cackling.
I know. Literally, all of the nurses taking them outside. But then it's also it's the fact that what actually makes you love the Frankenstein character is the fact that even though he has these easy targets, he doesn't go for those. He decides to go around and get the nurses that are all waiting on the side instead to take them out, because he's kind of a bit like, fuck this system. Like, I don't want you to make it easy for me, almost. With such mercy, it was so fun. This is a fun film.
Oh yeah, it's a fun film. It's not a long.
I enjoyed it. It's like 80 minutes, isn't it? Yeah. I enjoyed this way more than I was expecting when I first read about it. I was like, this could be, but there is definitely. I see why this is a cult film.
Oh yeah,
because it is just like. I mean, one, as I said, it's quick and fast. The race scenes, there is enough of that gore that you really enjoy it, but there's also that kind of political satire actually works quite well in some scenes.
I think it
like
works,
that with the old people getting rid of those, and some of the bits with like the Nazi and stuff like that are quite funny.
Yeah,
there are a few bits that don't work as well.
Yeah, I don't think it talking about the political themes and stuff like that. I think it dips its toe in it enough that it's kind of funny, and it's like, oh yeah, I can pick up on that. I can get it, but I don't think it's to the point where it's deep or it's philosophical. I don't think it's one of those films where it leads into it too much. The film is trying to say a message, and it's kind of a bit messy in what it's trying to say, but it's kind of been like, this is a film about this, and then you're like, could you go into it a bit more? It's like, nah,
it doesn't. That's the thing. It's like an idea, and I think similar to, as I mentioned before, there's another one, Rollerball, which has a similar thing where they go into a deaf sport inside of that. Some people might not really know that one that well. There was a remake with what's his name, American Pie, Chris Klein.
Yes,
where I think LL Cool J did a remake of it. I think where they took away most of the gore and the satire and just kind of like, we're just guys with spiky balls. Yeah. When Chris Klein before when it was the hype of American Pie, and all those actors got roles, and then they kind of started to realise that although he's a lovely guy, Chris Klein is wooden as a post. You know, what I mean?
They kind of awful. I remember Stifler basically just had roles in everything as Stifler, but it was when you were young. It was great seeing him in Evolution. Seeing him There was another big film seeing him in Final Destination that we covered. Go check it out.
Yeah. He was in a bunch. He was in the ones with The Rock and stuff like that. Welcome to the Jungle, all those kind of things. Yeah, he was pretty. He was probably the strongest of the bunch, though, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, going away from American Pie's cast, I'm trying to think. The other ones that made social satire like that. But I think quite often it was just trying to build on the idea that we're just trying to make a film out of like a concept more than they actually built into it. Like the writers said that a lot of these things were normally done quite quickly, and the turnaround was quite fast. And even the director of this film, Roger Corman, wasn't the director; he's the producer of the film. The director of the film said that the film actually went a lot more into the humour and the political satire side.
Yeah,
and then Roger Corman came in as the producer and basically went, let's add some blood, let's add some gore, and he's the one that added really the horror elements back into it. And that is why tonally it's a bit off at times.
Yeah,
because there are some scenes that seem to be playing it a bit more serious. Like you have the rebels with the old lady.
Yeah, which is kind of,
and those are kind of the scenes, I'd say, the only scenes that kind of make the film dip a bit. If it had just led into the humour of the race and I didn't even, the bits when the racers aren't on the course are actually quite odd and weird, exploitation and really weird. They seem to be naked most of the scenes that they're not racing.
Yeah, it is kind of it's very weird because they will have stops once they've gone through 5 or 6 states maybe.
Yeah,
and it's
which doesn't feel like 5 or 6 states.
Feel like
because that should take. It should feel like hours, and it feels like we only see a race for about a couple of minutes, and then it's now
in the bathhouse.
Now it's time for a bathhouse with all the women must have every body part exposed,
which is cool, it's kind of, but it's
it's completely of the time. People were basically coming out. I feel like Roger Corman basically knew what at that point in time what people was they wanted blood, tits, and gore, or just action. You know what I mean? So,
but it's weird because there's it's just strange. Like Frankenstein has this new navigator, and Frankenstein is supposed to be like horrendously deformed and like more machine than man. That's his whole story, but it's not. He's just like a dude.
He just looks like a dude, even when he takes his clothes off. Apart from like, I think he keeps one glove on his hand. Again, I'm saying George Lucas ripped off his film. But he's like literally there, like basically like, you don't look like anything. They just basically use this plot point of basically technology has come along enough that we can do this, and I can still look like a normal person, even though my cars. All of the cars in this film look like I put cardboard boxes around the sides of some of these cars. Not all of them, but some of them look like they've been like, you would be like, well, that's obviously like a set, prop on top of a car that you put around it.
It's really weird though, because like Frankenstein in one of the scenes, he's talking about himself, and it's really serious. He's almost like a superhero.
Yeah,
and he's like, and then he's talking about like fucking, and he's
like he is the leader, like he is the. Like, I am the only thing holding this generation together, kind of thing. They need me, they have to keep me, and then it's like, now go to the fuck.
He just like has this like so they have like navigators who help them like find their way, the shortest routes and stuff like that. And then it's just his is the granddaughter
of the leader of the rebellion. So she's there, which again that gets really like, it's really because she's basically just there willing to do whatever to like make him believe that she's with him, even though you feel the whole time that Frankenstein basically is onto her
one step ahead. Straight away. And it's really, and that.
But
whole plot,
even when she knows that he knows, it's like, but I'll still do that. Let's do the fuck.
Yeah, I'll fuck her.
Like she doesn't seem that bothered by like. She seems like she actually wants. I think actually, to be fair, it gives the idea that once she gets to know him, she actually kind of falls for him or gets drawn in by his masculinity or
masculinity.
I will point out, when you've got like Sylvester Stallone, who became like the biggest, like apart from Arnold, the biggest star of the 90s in action films, David Carradine just doesn't seem like your go-to action lead actor star.
And he's like your main star in this, Frankenstein.
Yeah.
It's David Carradine. It's quite like a skinny man in a gimp suit.
I was going to say, he just doesn't, like, when you look up to him and you see a point, like, there's the point when he, like, fights Sylvester Stallone. And
batters him.
You're like, Sylvester, you should be battering this guy. Like, look at him.
Battering him.
I ain't got much on me, and I was looking at David Carradine. But because David Carradine was in, I think it was called Kung Fu, like a TV series.
Yeah, so he knows Kung Fu.
Yeah, he knows Kung Fu. And this is the time, but this was also the time when, obviously, when... You know, you had cinemas, but TV was the big thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, like, it was still the big. In the 60s and 70s especially, like, 70s is when majority of people now all had TVs. So they're like, TV was almost as big, so the TV stars could also be like the... Kind of like now where actors are starting to be TV, it's reverse. Back then, you'd almost say that more people were probably starting to watch TV and being like a little bit like, oh, we don't actually need to go to the cinema as much because we've got a TV at home now.
Yeah.
So David Carradine in Kung Fu was like one of the biggest shows ever, as this like white guy who's the Kung Fu star.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So he got to be that, even though I know he wasn't the original choice. Peter Fonda, who was a very big actor at that time as well, more film-based, he was the original one offered and just said, this script is ridiculous. I'm not doing this.
Could he take Sylvester Stallone, though? Like,
no, he was basically the same body type as David Carradine. So at no point did they go, like, should we get this big muscular guy to be Frankenstein? Like, no. I guess the idea was Sylvester Stallone's meant to be muscle and no brain.
Yeah.
David Carradine's meant to be like
a gimp.
He's like a gimp, but he's meant to be the intelligence. Like he's always thinking out the strategy. Whereas Stallone, half the time, like his partner, his girlfriend, his wife, whatever the hell she's meant to be, the big titted one who was constantly just basically showing with her tits.
That's basically all it is.
And or as a beating bag for Sylvester Stallone, basically, like she's the one half the time that gives him good ideas. Sylvester Stallone most of the time then just like. I've just had a great idea.
I love it
like,
so
beat
much.
You, bitch.
Yeah, I love it so much. She comes up with something. He's like, what are you talking about? Why don't we do this? And just says
the same thing. And then he basically almost punches her. Or raises his hand like, why I order. Yeah,
it's so funny.
Classic why
I
order.
So funny.
But yeah, no.
There is one thing
he's a great part of this film.
And we spoke about the rebellion. And like the rebels are trying to stop the show and kidnap Frankenstein.
Yeah.
But they're also trying to take out the other races. And like this film feels like it's like an adult version of Looney Tunes or like Wacky Races. Because there's this moment where I think Matilda, the Nazi, is like racing off against Calamity Jane, and she's like ahead of her, and and Calamity Jane's like, oh, I'm not going to let it stand. I need to beat her. So they're racing, and they're kind of like driving along this cliff. And the rebellion set up this fake tunnel over the edge of a cliff, and Matilda's like, I'm going to take the tunnel, and just drives off the cliff and dies.
Yeah, I was going to say because it has the scenes where you get to literally see the guys coming in like. Sign this way. Like there's literally like a diversion side, like or go this way side, or things like that. Like where they're literally like, oh, okay, I will go this way then. It's so like funny. That. Like I think Frankenstein's the only one that's like, no, straight through it. The rest of them are like, okay, we're going to turn this way off the cliff,
and then she just dies.
It's as if, and it's even more ridiculous because if you watch the scene, I know it like because they make it quick shot, it makes it look really fast. But all I was thinking while I was watching the scene was like, you were literally just you were driving alongside a cliff, alongside the edge of a cliff for most of this. You can see there's an edge of the cliff there. Why do you think suddenly it's not going to be the edge of a cliff?
No, I love that, and it's weird. Like there's a scene.
That's how the Nazis die.
That's how the Nazis die. Nero, the hero, drives over a set-up baby, which turns out to be a bomb.
They kill. I love the scene actually. The Nazis kill her navigator.
Yeah, they just drive over him.
It's because he's on the edge of the road and he's like literally sticking out. And you're just there. I actually loved that shot. Because you're literally seeing the car get closer and closer, and you're just like, no, you've not noticed yet. No, you're still not. Calamity Jane, you're not going to have a look. Like they're literally, they're coming.
Yeah,
they're coming, and you're there like. They're going to drive over him. They're either going to do that or do something, or they're going to smash into the car or something. You're like, no, no, and it's just like Calamity Jane. Like, I could have sworn she even like looks like looking about a bit, but it's just like boom, and he's gone. and she's just like that bitch.
That bitch trying to get him leaves his body there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, she drives over the body to keep going.
So funny. And there was another great kill where these members of the rebellion they're setting up some kind of trap for someone. I can't remember who it is, and they all get down this manhole. And then like for some reason they don't let one of their mates up, so he gets run over. And then like one of them opens up to look at what happened, and she like somebody drives over the man cover and like splats his head between the man cover and the pavement.
That was one of the better ones when they're all like, when they're trying to get down and he's stuck. Yeah, that was awesome when they one goes. And again, it was quite a nice shot. The fact that they had, because the one guy gets hit and then the other guys pop back up, and you can just see from behind them. You can see. I think it's Stallone's one that goes over the man cover. I think Frankenstein's the one that takes out the first guy. I think, and then Stallone takes out the next one by like bump.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what happens.
That's the thing. I gotta be honest. The extra gore does make it more enjoyable.
Oh yeah, much more.
But it is that line between when you're saying like when is a film a horror film and when is a film a sci-fi that just happens to have blood and gore. And yes, some people might say, well, it's a sci-fi horror then. And it's like, well, it's not really, because I can't say that anything in here leads to it being scary or necessarily horrific. And if anything, the horror is played up almost as comedy. Yeah. It almost feels like sci-fi. So it's a weird thing to say, but it quite often, not all sci-fi has blood and gore, but when it does, but are we going to start saying that every time we have a sci-fi film that it's a horror film? And
it's muddy, isn't it?
Sci-fi horror, we're talking about Alien or something like that, then that's horror, because it's more horror in a sci-fi setting.
Yeah.
But I think horror needs to have a certain level of not just gore is not the thing that defines a horror film, because a comedy can have some gore in it. You know what I mean? They can have disgusting things that happen. And because this is played up so much like that, and because I mentioned earlier about Roger Corman almost went back and added in the gore, a lot of the gore later, that makes it feel like it was never intended to be a horror film anyway. So just because it has death race, what I mean, death in the title, it makes you think that it's horror.
But I mean, there's no tension, there's no creepy atmosphere. There's kind of nothing about it that's horror. That I was thinking it could potentially have some horror when Frankenstein is first introduced, because that scene, I wouldn't say it's creepy, but it's weird. It's kind of from his point of view as we see people like huddling around him and doctors, and it's kind of like, oh, could this be like a creepy, weird character that has some horror elements? And then it's like, oh no, it's just like a guy in a gimp suit, you know.
I mean, that's horrific in its own way.
It is horrific in its own way.
But yeah, no, I do think the only one element I do like we can say death like is horror is the death, basically the death parts of it, but the fact they add on gore to the death.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's enough to justify it being called a horror film.
No, of course not.
And I don't think it's got enough of the other elements. You need you need several elements to make a horror film, I think.
Yeah, of course.
And this is an action film. I think action film first and foremost. Sci-fi slightly dystopian, but doesn't always fully use it. It kind of just uses it as a plot device more than it actually trying to be a science fiction full story. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like there are some stuff that it does lead into sci-fi, like we've mentioned. It talks about we've got this new flag of America. Yeah, like they say that no holds barred is the American, like the new American way. Yeah, the president himself, like when we see him on TV, he's like this enigmatic figure who only goes by the president, and he's on some like weird island retreat, and it kind of has that feeling, almost like, I don't know if you...
It's more dictatorship as well, isn't it? It's not really a democracy anymore.
No,
it feels like a dictatorship.
Yeah.
The way that he appears, the way that he's public, but when he does appear, you can tell that basically, even then, the death race is still rigged anyway.
Yeah.
It's still they still expect Frankenstein to win because Frankenstein is the biggest star. Well, the other ones are expendable.
Well, that's the thing. Frankenstein is like not the same guy. You know, it's
that's why he's in a costume, isn't it? Because they can replace him,
because it's like a replaceable figure. You know, he's like a figurehead of the death race, so he's always got to win.
It's this version of him who is a bit more on the rebellious side, possibly, than prior versions were. Who's a little bit more kind of like a fuck you to all this kind of shit. You've like destroyed my body.
Yeah,
you've destroyed me. I can still do the fuck, but apart from that, like none of this makes sense. And I kind of agree with my navigator, but there's a lot of that with it almost makes me think like, you know, the whole idea of the death race is also used as a whole, you know, to lower the population and things like that across America and things like that, which it just doesn't feel like this is like, that's the only thing. Like, again, this is why it feels more like a plot device and less like a full thought out idea. Because it has stuff like the fact that if this is meant to be, there's got to be better ways of lowering the population than just anyone who's near a road.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't feel like they're going to kill enough people to make it actually feel like a proper culling of the population. It's more just like random birds, like a random guy that's fishing, like, I love you, I love you, to Stallone's character. He's like, I love you. I was like, yeah, well, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to mow you down, like running after him. Like, it just doesn't feel like it's a great idea. It makes you think that this is almost like it's like this one time a year, so kind of like the Purge, except the Purge is more effective in killing people than this is. You know what I mean? The Purge is more terrifying idea because half the time it's just like, right, so I'm in my house, I'm safe from death race. I'm in higher ground. I'm safe from the death race.
Yeah.
I mean, anything that isn't near a road, a path, or a field,
you're fine.
I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. So basically, just everyone. So half the time when you look at some of these people, you're like, well, this seems to be a global thing, and you're also, like that guy like fishing, like you're a fan of him, and he's just like, well, I'm not on the. Maybe it's because he wasn't on the track. Like they know where because there's a set course, really, isn't there? Yeah. Because the Stallone character's like, I'm off the fucking track. Like, you bitch, you sent me the wrong way, even though I'm pretty sure it was Stallone's idea to go a certain way.
Yeah, I'm sure it always is.
Or he got tricked by Frankenstein, but still, he's like proper pissed off, so he's beating on his woman. But even then, you're just like to all these people, like anyone who's out there, just like, why are you out here? Apart from the old people that were whisked out on there against their agreement, everyone else, you're just like, why are you anywhere near here?
Yeah.
That's why most of the deaths end up being made by rebels. Most of the deaths are rebels because everyone else is like, well, you're not dumb enough to be on the streets, so therefore you're not going to make much of a difference to the population of this country. Because it's like, what did the population go down by? Only random people that were near the roadside. We killed about 100 people. Okay, well, we've got about this many million people.
We have about 400 million people.
So we haven't really done a good job of our culling, have we? Yes, it does seem like that part is like an excuse for them just wanting to retain power and keeping fear in people and stuff like that. But again, it's not. That's the thing. Like, say, like with the Purge, or even something smaller. Like, you could even say, like, even the fear that you have in something smaller, like Hunger Games or Battle Royale or things like that, where it's not quite the same, but the tension and suspense is there when they are in those situations. You don't have that here. Whenever someone dies, it does literally feel like you've got the fangirl that goes to Frankenstein and sacrifices herself kind of for it. And like, you just watch that scene going, well, what the fuck was that?
It's all really weird.
Like, they're all like he's this martyr and things like that, and you must sacrifice yourself for him. And even Frankenstein's like, what the fuck is, why? It's like, really, it's because they love me. It's like, okay. It's just not conducive to that idea in that way. There are so many, again, like we said, that this is a fun film. It has the racing. There's one thing I absolutely love about this for the time is the fact that we get like the drawn backgrounds. Where you've got like the big cityscape. So like they're on like obviously like what looks like a NASCAR race track, and then behind it they've added in the image of like this giant like futuristic city landscape, but it's all like hands drawn.
It's quite cool, isn't it?
I liked that kind of throwback of like, you know, that's a real, because they could do it better than that in the 70s, but this is obviously showing the level of budget that they're doing.
I mean, it wasn't a big budget, was it?
Well, no, because that and the cars don't exactly look great. Like Stallone's like parts don't exactly look like they're like, and all of the, you know. Someone's got, is it Frankensteins is probably actually the most obvious, where it's like it's got such major parts to it, but it all looks like it's like plastic or card or stuff like that, where they made it look like a kind of, well, like a greenish, almost lizard-like kind of.
Well, it's like a weird lizard, isn't it? I don't know why, because his name's Frankenstein.
That's what I mean. Like, all I could do was like green Frankenstein, but I was also like,
that's a bit of a stretch.
And then there's the nerds going, and he's not even named correctly because he's not even Frankenstein. It's Frankenstein's monster. You goddamn nerd. No, those parts of it. But obviously, we're here to say must see horror, and this is what we've been talking about. The reason, to be honest, there's not too much that we can go into on this film, and this is why it's quite nice that we get to choose these ones, because occasionally we're going to get thrown left. You know, kind of thrown off course kind of here. And this one definitely, to set with the driving analogy, we are off course, we've been driven away. This wasn't one we expected. When I looked, I didn't even notice this one on the poster before you hit it, to be honest. So we were surprised to come into this and be like, oh, is this a horror? And if you look online, for a lot of people, and there's some people out there who might be disagreeing with us, and if so, at CMTH Podcast, get in touch with us and tell us. Rob's looking at me. I just stole his job.
Yes, you did. I was trying.
He's the one that was. But anyway, that you'll get to do your proper plug in a moment.
But I'm trying to find the social media and actually carry on.
But yeah, some people will be thinking, but this is a horror film because it's a classic, or Roger Corman made it, but I just don't think there's enough here to justify it, and this is why it definitely would fall into it's not a must-see horror because it's not a horror.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you shouldn't check this film out. I think you'll have a lot of fun if you do check this film out. I definitely enjoyed it more than I expected to. I thought it was and it's a quick 80 minutes, so it's not taking up a lot of your time, but it's a nice throwback. It's kind of interesting seeing Sylvester Stallone at his very I don't know. He's always been scenery chewing, but it's interesting because it was actually when he was a little bit like, he did the first Rocky and he was trying to be a bit more serious, and this is just before that, where he was being the ultimate unserious character, you know. But it's also interesting, like you said before, about that he's leading in. He seems to be enjoying it. He seems like he's fully leading into this whole like asshole Italian kind of stereotypical kind of beating his woman kind of like, they're just leading into all the stereotypes for this muscle bound like behemoth of a guy,
basically.
And just making him like the all-American Italian kind of asshole. But But yeah, it's really hard to justify this would make it onto any must-see horror list, because I just don't think it justifies being a horror film. Have you got any social media, any people that said anything about the film?
Yeah, so we had one over at Twitter at CMTH Podcast, and it was Moments in Time and Space Podcast. They said, "This is a personal favourite of mine, and I've watched it a dozen times as well as I own it on Blu-ray. It is more of a dystopian sci-fi film. It also has elements of action, romance, drama, social commentary. It would not be for everyone, but this film is so bad it is good." And I kind of agree with that. This is not a must-see horror film. This is not even a horror film.
No,
but it's a fun cult action / sci-fi.
It's a B movie.
Film. It's a B movie.
It's a fully into the B movie.
Yeah, it's short enough that you'll watch it, you'll enjoy it.
Yeah,
and if it was like a longer film, it would feel far too long.
If you added half an hour onto this film trying to go more into the dystopian stuff and stuff like this would be probably a terrible film.
Yeah, but for what it is, it's a fun film. It feels weird to have covered it on this podcast because it's so clearly not a horror movie that they must have been doing that poster, had 99 films, and they were like, "What's a horror film?" We need one
just
more.
Just googled words like horror, death. Oh, death. Oh, death.
Yeah, somebody must have just put death into Google. I know, Death Race. Yeah, that's a horror film. Put that on there because it's not at all. It's not any slight elements.
No,
but it's fun. It
is. It's a fun film. For you like horror fans and stuff like that who do want, there is enough gore that you'll be like, oh yeah, this is kind of filling my quota for a bit of blood and a bit of gore. And a bit of if you've got a dark sense of humour, it's got some proper dark funny scenes we've mentioned, like being elderly and stuff like that, like the coming after the kids and stuff like that in some ways, and it has some moments that are a bit like, oh okay, like it pushes some boundaries as well, and it has that nice the dystopian, but it has those nice like the rich, and therefore you've got the people in the publicity who are really basically they just act like they love anything to do with them because it's almost out of fear that they are. So they're just like, everyone's my friend. You're amazing, but anyone that goes against you, you are wrong. You are lying. You are. Yeah. So it's got all those classic dystopian kind of traits that are used, but it's not overused. And as I said earlier about the director saying, I think there was more of that stuff and that Roger Corman cut it down. I actually think in this case that Roger Corman was probably right to do what he did, because if we'd had more of that stuff, I think the rebellion stuff, that's the bit that kind of brings down the film at times. Yeah, and it is more of a case of the add of the blood and the add of the kind of more leaning into some of the humour and stuff like that at times, I think actually makes this fun.
Yeah,
and I think you easily could have pushed it away. This is just one of those throwaway films. It's not one that would make any 100 greatest film list of any kind. I don't even know if it'd be in the 100 greatest B movies. You know what I mean? But it's a fun time, and but it's 100%, and it's. I think, what is this? This is my second to not make it onto must-see horror. I
think this is my first.
I think this is your first.
This is the first one that has been evicted. That has no shoes.
Event Horizon, I put not.
You said no, I said yeah.
Yeah, but we were close.
We were close.
We were back and forth on it, but I was definitely. I think I decided that it's not top 100. And this one, but that one was it wasn't top 100, but it might nearly be. But I wouldn't put it in my top 100 mostly horrors. Whereas this one's not even near it because it should be on this list.
I allowed entry to Event Horizon, but
I
allowed entry to the club. But I'm like the bouncer, letting things in. But Death Race 2000.
That just went all dirty in my mind, and then it reminded me of the way that David Carradine died.
Yeah. I will say
his odd closet.
His odd closet. I will say David Carradine, Death Race 2000. Not tonight, mate. You've had too much. You're wearing Reeboks trying to get into the club. Go elsewhere, mate. You were denied entry.
Oddly enough, that's exactly how I would expect Frankenstein to die.
Yeah, probably.
In that gimp suit.
Well, I guess that sums up. So, as always, we hope you've enjoyed this episode. It wasn't a horror film, but we had fun with it. Come and let us know your thoughts on Death Race, and if you actually think it is horror and must-see horror, over on Instagram and Twitter at CMTH Podcast. Please remember to hit the subscribe button. and leave us a lovely review. We will see you next week with another must-see horror, and take care and goodbye.